Thank you. So welcome to the 40th anniversary webinar. We are doing on equity in games-based approaches. This is the second webinar on game teaching for groups of diverse skill levels and ages. I will pass over to Bianca, who can begin and introduce herself. Hello, Bianca.
Well, thank you very much, Ellen. Okay, so let me just share my screen with all of you. Just let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Is that okay?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, I would like to say good afternoon and good evening and good morning, actually, to all of you that are attending today. And I would also like to thank Professor Naoki and Professor Linda Griffin as well, and Ellen for organizing everything. That was lovely. Thank you very much. So let me just minimize this. Okay, so this is actually a very good opportunity for us to talk about equity on game-based approaches. And it is a pleasure for me to share my experience and my knowledge on games teaching and how through games teaching and game-based approaches, we can actually adapt teaching to groups of diverse skill levels and age groups. So, well, in the first part of the presentation, I will briefly talk about what I've been doing over the past 7 years. And that has been crucial to look at games teaching from a different perspective. And actually a perspective, sorry, that has been or that has the best interest of all the individual students in mind. So I will try not to take too long in this part, because the second half, as I said, I will show examples of games that can be done across different age groups and skill levels, and how they can be adapted and modified to suit the students' needs. So at the end, you're more than welcome to ask questions, and we can discuss about the presentation if you would like. So my interest in game-based approaches started in Portugal. So I'm from Portugal originally. I was completing my internship at the time, and I felt that teaching was very focused on the teacher, actually, how we as teachers organized the classes and what we wanted the students to achieve. And this was something that passed on from generation to generation of teachers. So because of that, so that was the reason why I decided to go to New Zealand to pursue a PhD. And I started doing research on approaches that had the student as a priority. So I started doing research pretty much straight away. So I decided to do my PhD in 2015, and I started my first research study then. And I presented on my first conference in Australia, in Melbourne. And since then, I moved to New Zealand, completed a PhD. Actually, I researched on how the teachers actually develop their beliefs and their practice about games, so in PE classes. And then more recently, I went to Japan to complete a postdoctoral research study. And that's when I met Naoki. So due to my experiences of teaching, coaching, and doing research in different countries, cultures, and contexts as well, my teaching has become heavily based on research. And being a researcher myself, it has been crucial to further develop my teaching and coaching. So over the last 7 years, my research focus has been on game-based approaches and how we can use them to generate awareness, understanding of the game, motivation, and enjoyment as well. So as a gymnastics coach, part of my research has also been dedicated to how can we improve teaching and coaching as well on individual sports. So not so focused on game, but how we can improve some of the common aspects, such as awareness, problem solving ability, enjoyment, and motivation as well. So while working in New Zealand, I actually was closely working with Professor Richard Light, and I wrote 2 book chapters with him on applying positive pedagogy to coaching gymnastics. And these chapters were based on my own experiences of implementing an athlete-centered approach for individual sports. I have also wrote a chapter on the influence of context on teachers and coaches' use of game-based approaches. And this chapter was based on my research study that I've done, that I conducted in New Zealand, that showed that teachers and coaches tend to be unconsciously influenced by the context that they're in. So this not only impacts their teaching and coaching, but at a deeper level, if we think, can sometimes impact their beliefs about teaching and coaching as well. So the one below that was more recently, and that was when I collaborated with Professor Naoki, who has been actually an advocate of game-based approaches in Japan and has been very active in implementing and spreading the knowledge on new developments in games teaching. So I wrote 2 book chapters. So this is one of them. One about the commonalities and differences between the main game-based approaches. And then the other one was this one over here on questioning, on game-based teaching and coaching as well. And this one is more giving practical examples of possible questions to be used, called question starters. And also during 2020 and 2021, both Dr. Naoki and I were invited to lecture at the PE community coaching program and community coaching program for women organized by the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports and the Ministry of Women and Child Development of India. So that was a really great opportunity to share our knowledge with them and actually listen to their experiences as well. So now that I introduced myself, hopefully it was quick enough. And I talked also a little bit about my research and what I've been doing on game-based approaches. I will go over the main topics of today's lecture. So firstly, I will briefly talk about game-based approaches and what they have in common. Then I will explore the aspects that can influence the use of game-based approaches, but this will be from the learner's perspective. And finally, I will go over a bit more in depth about how can we implement and adapt games and game-based approaches to different age groups and skill levels. So here I will share some videos of my own experience teaching different age groups. So if we think over the years and after Teaching Games for Understanding was developed, and this was in 1982, many game-based approaches have been developed around the globe. So here are just some examples. There are way more than the ones that I'm showing here, but these are probably some of the main approaches that have been developed. So we have game sense, play practice in Australia. We have tactical games model in the United States, teaching games for understanding. So the first one in the UK. We have a little bit more recent, not that recent though, the games concept approach in Singapore. We also have, for example, the one that I talked about, positive pedagogy, which is more towards individual sports, but we can still implement it here as well as a game-based approach. And this was in New Zealand, I would say, because at the time Professor Richard Light was in New Zealand working. So I would like to talk about the common aspects within game-based approaches, because I believe that when we're trying to implement games within a range or across a range of age groups and skill levels and ability and motivation, it is important to know the common aspects within these approaches to make sure that we're able to adapt to what the students need from us. So even though these approaches were developed in different countries, they share many common aspects that allow us to implement them as needed. So firstly, they all share the same goal, which is improving the students' tactical awareness and understanding, decision-making and problem-solving ability. Secondly, they all have the potential to enhance the ability to transfer tactical knowledge, and this can be from game to game or from sport to sport. And they all intend to enhance learning through participant motivation and enjoyment. Also, if we think they all share a constructivist perspective, so they try to build up knowledge, using the students as the main focus and having them as well construct the knowledge as they go. So they all view learning as an active process in which the students seek out information in relation to the task at hand. And this search can either be done individually or collectively. They use similar pedagogical strategies other than instruction, so such as questioning, cooperative learning, personal reflection, and also peer teaching that happens as well. And lastly, if we think about how they are similar, they can all be implemented for both teaching and coaching as well. So hopefully this part didn't take too long, because now I would like to start the second half. So this leads us to the main focus of today's lecture, which is actually understanding how can we use games teaching for different age groups and skill levels. So I was able to teach a class to year 4, year 5, and year 9. So if we think about the age groups here, ideally, I would like to have a bigger gap between year 4 and 5 to make sure that I could probably explain to you those gaps in age. But since I'm not currently teaching, so these were classes from some of my colleagues that I actually had to ask to teach. It was not possible to have that range of age groups in a short period of time. However, there are important differences from each class that you can see here from the very beginning, and that are important, very important to point out. So if we think, and this was in Portugal, so I will explain briefly. In Portugal, primary school goes from year 1 to year 4, and they do not have PE as a compulsory subject. So it is an extracurricular activity. So here you can see that for year 4, they have 2 45-minute classes a week, but PE is not compulsory. So some of them actually enroll for PE, some of them might not be enrolled. Then if we move on to year 5 and year 9, PE is a subject, so it is compulsory. And they have 2 classes per week. It was one of 1 hour and a half, and then the other one of 45 minutes. And this sometimes is different if you are in a private school or in a public school. It depends how they actually manage and have everything scheduled. So I know that for one of the private schools, they had, instead of having one hour and a half class, they had a little bit more. So it was like a 2 hour and 15-minute class. And this was the PE teacher and another teacher from another subject. They talked between them, and they figure out that it was best for the students to have more time doing PE and the other subject than having it separate throughout the week. So they were able to combine that. So it is also important to say here that this was my first time with these groups, and this also influenced the games I chose, of course, to do with them. So if we move over here, and this was the class structure. So I'll just tell you, I've done in 45 minutes because I didn't want to take too long from their classes. I've done 3 games with them, and I try to do the same games, modified, of course, with year 4, year 5, and year 9. So then we can see the difference and what I've done differently from group to group. So because this was my first time with them, as I said, I chose some common games. So we have a better chance of the students actually recognizing some of the features. So to demonstrate how the games can be easily adapted to the groups, I decided to do the same games with all 3 years in classes, apart from this one. So this one was tag ball, and I only done this one with year 4 and 5. And I will tell you in a little bit why I've done this. So I've done this game with them because mainly to observe them. So because I didn't know how they were in terms of listening and following rules and talking and interacting with each other, I wanted to have a game that I was able to observe them, how they interacted with each other, if they were capable of following rules and communicate between them. So for these two groups, I decided to talk to them, actually not talk to them about the goal of the class, because I didn't want to influence their decisions nor their normal behavior during class. So if this was my class, I would probably tell them the goal of the class, and we would work on that way, so they would know what to do from the beginning. But because it was the first time, I didn't do it. It was my, I would tell them the goal in the class in order to generate more awareness, but because I didn't want to influence, I haven't done that. So the game consisted in having some students tagging their colleagues. So there were 3 to 4 students tagging, and while they were playing tag, they will have to pay attention to some of the whistles that I would actually and stimulus that I would actually do throughout the game. So 1 whistle would be stop, 2 whistles pass to another person, and then 3 whistles would be gather around me. So I will move on over here, and you will see this is the video of year 4. So I am going to play it and I will talk throughout. So I'll put a little bit. So the first thing I've done was actually introduce myself, get to know them a little bit more, and ask them some questions about how they perceive themselves in class. So their behavior, if they're good listeners or not. And then I started explaining the game. So for this part over here, I actually used the students, one of them to help me. And then I told them what to do on each whistle. So this was the second whistle. And I'm saying that they had to pass the ball on the second whistle. I made sure to explain this very carefully and slowly, because they were not my students, and I wanted them to be confident while going in the game, that they knew what to do. And I also paid attention to their questions, because that's actually very important to make sure that they succeed during the task. So I answered her question, which was she didn't know if they were tagged and they had to do like kangaroo jumps. So they had to do 5 kangaroo jumps, what to do. So I told them, explained them that they would do the kangaroo jumps and then they would keep going. So they were not out of the game. So as you can see here, I started with a pretty big space. They were around 18 of them. And as you can see, for the most part, I actually decided to let them play and observe them mostly, and see if they were good following the rules. So as you can see here, they took a little bit, but I gave them time, and it is good to praise them for their efforts. And I try to let them be throughout the game and have fun. So as you can see here, the way that I stopped. Yeah, so there's a boy that was a little bit frazzled because he thought that he was actually being tagged, but he wasn't. So in this situation, just solve the problem very quickly, let the game run at the same time, and then I would let him go straight away. I'm actually going to put back a little bit. So as you can see here, I whistled twice, which was passing. And you can see that passing was not the best, but I was not actually focused on technique here. So I didn't stop the game to correct them, and I let the game keep going. So I started with a pretty big space, and as I was saying, they were 18 or 20 kids. So it was not a big class. And now, as you can see, I'm actually making sure that the space is less. So I'm actually making it a little bit more complex here. And I'm questioning them about if they think it would be easier or harder in a smaller space. And they said harder. And I asked for who? And then easier for who? So they were able to answer that, saying that it would be easier for the taggers and harder for the ones running away. So they were pretty aware of the goal of the game, and they were actually listening and having fun. And as you can see here, this is a way that we can capture and have their actually attention, is to make sure that you have a little bit of fun with them as well. Okay, so this was the first game that I've done, and this was with year 4. And I've done the same game with year 5. And as you can see, you were able to see here, I only made the game harder once, because I wanted them to feel comfortable and not actually feel that the game was too hard for them just yet. So from that, it was a football, or actually a futsal court size, and then we moved to a basketball size court, and that was the only change that I've done, apart from the rules that I had throughout the game. So now with year 5, I will show them what to do. Okay, so here I'm actually explaining the rules of the game. So once again, I was very careful explaining the rules of the game and making sure that if needed, I would demonstrate what to do. I told them that they had to find actually a friend or a peer to pass the ball on 2 whistles. So the explanation was pretty similar to the other one. And straight away, they went to the game. Same thing happened here. As you can see, they took a little bit longer. This was the first time that I actually whistled. So just let them get used to the game. This was what I tried to do. I tried to reinforce the rules of the game as needed without actually stopping the game too much. And then what I did here, I'm not sure if you noticed, but I started with 1 whistle to make sure that they were paying attention. And that whistle was for them to stop. And then after that, after I reinforced the rule, because I didn't understand the first time, what I tried to do was do exactly the same thing. So instead of just moving to another whistle or to another task or to changing the game straight away, I tried to reinforce that and make sure that everyone understood the rules of the game. Sorry about the wind noise. Okay, so here they got confused once again, but then. So as you can see here, I didn't actually told in the beginning. Here I changed from a basketball court to half court, and now it's a little bit under half court for them. So I tried to change that 3 times instead of the 2 times with year 4. These guys were maybe a little bit more active. They were more engaged in the task, and they were more aware. So during the this game, it was easier for me to quickly change the rules. Instead of stopping the game, I would say, now you only have half of court, and then they will go straight away. So it was that easy with this group. So as you can see here, on that red circle over there, let me just put back a little bit. So I whistled twice, and that was to pass the ball. And as you can see, I was not paying attention to technique, but you're able to see that the passing skills, and because they're not communicating well at this point, the passes were done or too close to each other, or they were not looking. So they were not actually paying attention to that, or just giving the ball on the other person's hand. It didn't matter at the time. I did pay attention to it, and then I followed through on the next game. So depending on what you want from them, don't worry too much if they're not following the rules or doing the technique properly.
Okay.
So with this group over here, actually with the year 4, I decided to do some questioning between changing rules. So I stopped the game, I changed the rule, and then I asked them if they thought it would be harder or easier in a smaller space, just to create that awareness before going into the game. With this group, I didn't do any questioning about what they thought about going to a smaller space and what they think it would be harder or easier. I tried to do the questioning at the end. So I decided to let them play, and then at the end I would do the questioning. So what I asked them here was, throughout the whole game and changing all the rules and the spacing and all of that, what they thought it would be easier or harder. And this was also maybe a lead up to the next game. This group over here, they were pretty well behaved, and they were very engaging in conversation and answering the question, which was awesome. If this was not the case, then I would probably have to start by giving them some pointers here and there, or maybe tell them, for example, that's what I've done with year 4 sometimes, is asking a more closed-end question or some hypothesis here and there to engage them in conversation, and then move on to a more deep questioning. So here we can see that the differences from year 4 to year 5 from the first game were questioning and spacing. So those were the main aspects that differ from year 4 to year 5. So here on year 4, it was less complex in the beginning. They have more space to move freely and find empty spaces. And for the passers as well, it means that when I whistle twice, they have a better line of pass and gain vision because they were not all together on top of each other. Then whether it's for the year 5, it was a little bit more complex because it was pretty much the same amount of students. It was 20-20 or 18-20 on each class. And I started already with a smaller space. So here it was more complex from the beginning. Also, they actually the changes were a little bit more throughout the game, so it was harder for them to do that and understand that they had more space and they had to adapt. Of course, the playing area changed a little bit, so they have to adapt quickly. And then the other change was questioning. So it was less open-ended on the first question only for year 4s. So I started with that hypothesis. For example, do you think it was harder or easier on the first game versus the second? And they would say, oh, if it is harder, and then you would say why. So that why would actually make them think and actually look to the game and see what happened and make sure that they were engaged in that discussion with their peers and understanding why it was easier or why it was harder and giving their opinion about it. And I've done in the middle of the game with year 4, so they were more aware to the second half, and then would try to go there and do it a little bit different or adapt to that situation. Whereas for the year 5, they were a little bit more open-ended. So the questioning here was a little bit more, what have you done on the first game that you haven't done on the second? Or what did you change from the first to the second to the third throughout these changes? And then these questions were actually done at the end of the game. Now, moving on to the second game that I've done, this was pass and run. And this actually, I gave this name, not sure if there's another name for it, but I've done this game with year 4, year 5, and year 9. And the initial rules for this game were doing as many passes as possible with a partner. So this was 2 people with 1 ball, and this was in around 30 seconds. So it was not exactly 30 seconds. We don't need to be too rigid about that, but just giving them some time to pass around. And after each pass, change places. So what happened here is I had to tell them exactly what to do for year 4s and 5s. And you will see in the video that I actually have some students helping me show the others what to do. They were not allowed to dribble, and they had to stay at least 2 meters away from each other. I was not too rigid about it either. We don't have measuring tapes. So what I've done was just 2 big steps back or 3 big steps back, and that would be it. So going over here to the video for year 4s, I let them pick the groups. So I didn't know, I gave them not too much time to do that because I wanted them to be quick. And here is they found a friend or they found a person that they wanted to work with and be together. There's always, as you can see here, there's always someone that does not have a partner to work with, or the other kids usually do not pick them to work with. So what I've done is I told them that they would be allowed to change groups halfway through. So then they would be probably easier to tell them, okay, you work with them and then we swap and everything would be okay and they will be engaged and motivated anyways. Actually, we didn't change partners here. So it was a little bit of a lie there, but we can do that if we have more time, which is, okay, swap partners. And then everything would be different as well, because changing partners is another person to pass the ball to and to interact with. So the whole dynamic of the game would be different straight away. So they were working together here. And then what I've done is they went and grab a ball to each partner. And then I grab one of the students to go there and help me show what I wanted from them. So I told them the space that they would have. And actually here I decided to divide the class in 2. As you can see, you have one group on one side and one on the other side. And the middle was not being used. So this space over here was not being used. And what they had to do is they had pretty much like a basketball court sideways to pass the ball to their peers. In doing that, I was telling them that they cannot be too close to each other. So it was good because these kids, they were pretty good listeners, as you can see, and they were paying attention throughout the class. And visualizing here what to do actually helped them go to the task knowing exactly what I wanted from them. So I was talking about, most importantly, about spacing here with them. I never told them how I wanted them to pass the ball. I just wanted them to make sure that they were able to find another space to move to. As you can see here, the strategy was probably 2 steps to the side, but you can see that these 2, a boy and a girl here in the middle, they were pretty good moving around and finding a different space. So they were communicating pretty well. And they were counting the passes. So that was a pretty good example of how they were adapting to the situation. Oh, sorry, I think the video is stopping. Well, I'm not sure about the quality of the video here, but then I asked them how many passes were they able to do in those 30 seconds, just to make sure that for the second part, they were able or at least trying to do more passes. So here I changed the spacing again, and instead of having that basketball court sideways, they had a little bit less than half of it. Still the two groups on each side. So here I'm talking about communicating and making sure that when they pass the ball, their peers know where they want the ball to go to, or if they're looking. So give them a little bit of pointers here to make sure that they succeeded. So the girls here on this side, they lost the ball quite a bit, but it was fine. They were actually trying. It was harder for them to understand where to go, but they were really engaged in trying to find that free space, and they were helping each other, as you can see. So they're helping each other. I was going there to help them as well as needed. So it's good when they're working here in groups that I can go to each group as they need, or each bigger group, so all of them or just the two of them. And I can go to each of the groups and actually help them or maybe guide them throughout that discovery process, maybe individually or in a smaller group, because not all of them have the same needs. So we can go here and there and try to make sure that they understand and make questions as well. So we can question them while they're playing those games to make sure that they understand. So here I asked them once again about how many passes they were able to do. This is a strategy of probably competing against themselves, because it was not actually a competitive game, but it was good for them to have that competition or strategy to make sure that they were able to do more passes than they've done on the first game. Now I'm actually here asking them if they found it easier or harder to pass with more space or less space. So some of them said, this was actually a pretty interesting conversation here. Some of them said it was easier to pass with more space. So they had more space. They said that they had more space to move around, so it was easier to complete the passes. And some of them actually said it was easier to pass with less space. So and one of them said, why? And I actually looked at him and said, that's a good question. Why? And I asked them why they said or they felt that it was easier to pass with less space. So the reason that he gave was that because they had less space, they couldn't move that much. So here he kind of adapted the rule a little bit. So I said that they had to pass the ball and then move to another space. And he was actually shortening that space to make sure that they could pass closer. So this was not actually the goal of the game, but I didn't say to him, no, your answer is wrong. I believe that we should let them express their opinion, and his opinion is not wrong 100%, because it's obvious that if you make a pass closer to your peer, it would be an easier pass. But then I asked them to come towards me. So I actually exemplified how this would be in a game situation where they would have opposition. So here I asked one of the students to come and be on defense, and they were both on offense, but keeping that short space that they said that they had during the game. And then I asked her to defend. So as you can see here, first of all, they started actually moving backwards a little bit. So they were not that close as they were in the game, because they found that they had that necessity to find more space to actually receive the ball. And she was able to intercept the ball straight away. So it was very fun here to see. So then I asked them if they understood what happened. So they said that she was able to intercept the ball because they were too close to each other. So he understood over there that being alone and passing the ball closer to each other is easier, but in a game situation, then they will have to find that free space and probably be further away to actually receive the ball. So that was very interesting to see that line of thought developing throughout that questioning at the end of the game. So then at the end, what I try to do here, what I try to do at the end is they develop that line of thought, and then I'll kind of do a summary of that, because I believe it is important for them to stay and have in mind that last little bit to move on to a different game, because the goal, or what we want them to develop, that thinking, it will stay there throughout when we move on to a different game. So now moving on here to the year 5. I've done exactly the same thing with year 5. So I had one student helping me actually explain the game and demonstrate, because it's easier for them, that visual understanding. So I cut it there because it was a little bit too long. But here, as you can see straight away, let me just move forward a little bit. I actually highlighted the situation because it was a passing game. Actually, I think there was a group here with 3, if I'm not mistaken. If it's not here, it's year 9. But here, as you can see, straight away, they were trying to do as many passes as possible. And you have this girl right here passing the ball to the other one without her actually looking at it, and they lost the ball straight away. So when I stopped the game and asked them, some of them were actually confused about the number of passes between them or steps, because pass in Portuguese can also be walking. So they were a little bit confused, the number of passes between them or the number of steps. So I tried to ask them what they have done over there to make sure that they completed a pass successfully. And they said, one of them said, oh, we can call them and make sure that they look at us. So I said, okay, if we call them, means that we're doing what? And I told them, because they didn't know actually the word, and I said communicating. And then we restarted the game. They had a little bit there, so I cut it over here because it was a long time. But then I've done the same question over there, and I asked them if they were able, after that small discussion, if they were able to do more passes or less passes than they've done on the first situation. So here, some of them said that they were able to do more, and I asked some of them why they were able to do more passes in this case. Actually, here, I asked them if they lost the ball more or less times. And one group said they lost more times. So here I asked them why they lost the ball more times, and they said that they were trying to rush too much. So even though they were communicating with less space, they were not able to find that open space to pass the ball. So then, as you can see here, they only have half court now. So they started with a full court, now they have half court. And as you can see, the girls are outside of the court. So that competition between them was also there. So some of them have done over 20 passes. So some of them said it was harder for them to make more passes because they had less space. There were more of them in the same space. And now here it's important. So I haven't done this with year 4 because I noticed that in terms of cooperation and trying to find strategies within the group, they were getting more distracted. So what I've done was with year 5, I told them with their peer, with their partner, to go and try to find a strategy to make more passes in those 30 seconds. So here there's a new component that I added to the game, which is helping them discuss about the situation, what they have done that didn't go that well, or that they want to improve with their peers. So here, as you can see, they're going to find a little bit of space. So as you can see, some of them are actually practicing over there, but they forgot that they had to pass and then move around. So the strategy here was making as many passes as possible, but they completely forgot about the first rules of the game. Not all of them though. So I saw some of them actually making sure that they would pass and then move, which was pretty good. So now at the end, they had to reflect about the strategies that they came up with during that little break, and then share with their peers over there. Some of them said that they do kind of like a carousel type of thing, so they would pass and go in circles. Actually, I saw quite a few of them doing that. And then these two little ones, we actually had some fun over here because I didn't tell them that what they've done was wrong. I didn't want to emphasize the wrong part of their strategy, or the fact that they had forgotten to do what they were supposed to, which is pass and have that distance and all of that. So I just played with them and said, oh, you were dancing with each other. So it was kind of like fun for all of them. And then after that little discussion, they had one more time less space to pass the ball. So as you can see here, I changed the game quite a few times here, whereas in the year 4, it was only a couple of times that I've changed the game. So even though I made it complex, more complex on year 4, it was not as many times. So they didn't have to adapt because I really wanted them to understand the game before changing it too much. So as you can see here, they're trying to move just back and forth, some of them. They started to move way less and losing the ball way more. So there were balls flying around. Some of them were outside of the court. So here I actually didn't ask them, sorry about that. I here didn't ask them about how many passes they were able to complete. That was not my goal here. It was just to ask them if they thought it was easier or harder than the last one. And this was quite surprising to hear, because some of them, actually, I think most of them, thought it was easier over here than on the last one. But I believe it is because they started to move less. So they didn't pass and move. Over here, they were pretty much on the same spot. So they found a spot over there that they didn't want to move around, and that was pretty much it. So now I will move on over here. So this is the first time I've only done 2 games with year 9, and this is the first game that I've done with them. So as you can see here with them, I started by telling them the goal of the lesson. So this was different from the other groups. Instead of telling them or actually reflecting about the class and what we've done at the end, I told the year 9s what I wanted them, what we were going to work. So I told them that we were going to work communication, pass, and spacing. And here I was going to be a little bit more aware of technique instead of doing as I've done with year 4 and 5.
Estes 3 componentes é o que eu quero que vocês prestem mais atenção, e como eu ouvi as regras que eu vos vou dizer, está bem? Portanto, eu quero que vocês se mantenham no campo de base.
And here was also different because I didn't use any of the students to help me demonstrate. It was just verbally. So this is also different because their understanding is different as well. And I started the game straight away with less time explaining the rules. So I was highlighting this over here. So there's a group of 3 because they didn't have, I think they had 19 total. So we had like a couple of groups of 3. And as you can see there, the girls are actually doing a pretty good job passing and moving around. So that was a group of 3. They were moving along the court and making sure that the pass were actually there. We had some balls going around, but if we think about the goal of this game, they were actually pretty good following the rules and understanding the game and actually moving around. So there's here a difference between age and how they were able to understand what the game was about.
Agora é assim, quem fez mais do que 10 passos levanta o braço.
So here we kept the same thing. I did ask them how many passes were they able to do in those 30-40 seconds.
Eu quero que vocês entre o vosso grupo.
But then, without questioning them, I went straight away and asked them to find a strategy to be able to complete more passes. So I gave them like 30 seconds. They were able to discuss and then go back to the game.
Fazer mais passos, mais ou menos no mesmo tempo, tá bem? Tem 30 segundos para falar entre vós e depois continuamos.
So here they went to their groups. As you can see here on the right side, which is pretty interesting, I actually noticed this, they were all talking about the strategy and they were pretty fast. So what I said was maybe their strategy was so good on the first time that they wanted to keep them. So here what we need to do is just let them actually discuss or not as they want, because main strategy or the strategy that they started with, it might have worked for them. So we don't need to tell them to change something. So they do it if they feel that they need to. So still here with the full court, but you can see here that they're all moving over the court, and these two boys that actually didn't strategize that much, they were not moving as much. So their strategy was pretty much just going around and finding a little bit of free space and keep doing that over and over again. So here it was fun because those boys actually made more than 30 passes. And what I said was, oh, you didn't change places. And that was exactly what happened. And that I was able to see in the footage after that. So they found that space and they were there while all the other ones were on the other side trying to work around the space and move around. So they've done way more, but they didn't do actually what they were supposed to in terms of actually, they've done that because they found the free space, but they were not moving quite as much. But that would change if it was in a game situation. So then I changed, and this was less than half court. So the change was pretty big here because they moved on from full court to less than half court. So they had to adapt pretty quickly to that space, or actually that lack of space that they had on this one. So now I actually have them reflect about their initial strategy, which is pretty good with this group over here. They're older and they can analyze if the strategy worked or not.
Ok. Mas, por exemplo, se vocês tiverem que progredir no campo, já está certo. Portanto, a vossa estratégia.
So here some of them said that the strategy was pretty much pass, move a little bit, receive the ball, move a little bit, and pass again. So what happened here was they were pretty much staying on the same spot or just moving sideways back and forth. And what I told them is that imagine that you are in a game situation. So the goal is to score a basket. You cannot stay in the same place, right? So I actually helped them reflect here a little bit that staying on the same place, yes, it would work for this game, but it wouldn't work in a game situation. And once again here, I moved the cones further and they had only less than a quarter, maybe, of the space to play. And as you can see, there was a higher rate of ball loss and mistakes over here, which was pretty good to see because they were still trying to move around, but there was a lot of those passes, overhead passes, that didn't work that well most of the time. So there was a lot of balls lost over there. They were still having fun though. They were engaged and enjoying the game. And here I asked them if it was easier or harder to actually complete the passes. And then just to finish it off, I changed the game once again, and I gave him just a little square over there. So as you can see here, was complete chaos. They were bumping against each other. I actually didn't do this game for too long. Was mainly to see their reaction to that lack of space and how they would cope with it in their strategy. So here I asked them about how competitive was in a smaller space and in a bigger space, and how difficult it was to have space to pass the ball. I asked them also about the importance of communication in a small space, and they said it was really important, and spacing as well. So I asked them about how important was spacing. and they said it was really important, and they found out the difference between having a lot of space to play and have that free range and have that really good line of pass and not being able to see and to move around. So it was good, the transfer that they've done over there from the first half of the game to this little bit over here, that it was pretty chaotic and they couldn't pass or move around. So they found that quite interesting. So just going over here about the differences, here I added another thing. So the first one, the main differences were space and questioning. And here was also the number of players, not only because we had a little bit more players, but we had groups of 3 instead of groups of 2. And then the space, I changed it completely. So I changed a lot more times on year 5 and then on year 9 than I've done on year 4, according with their understanding and their level of skill as well. And then the questioning was completely different. Once again, was less open-ended on the first question for year 4s. And I didn't go in depth about each question. And then on year 5, I went a little bit more, so it was more like an intermediate level of questioning and deep thinking. And then on year 5, I just pretty much gave them just questions and tools and strategies that they had to come up with. So it was pretty good to see that the level of understanding here, I was able to adapt from year 4, 5, and 9 to make sure that they were being challenged accordingly to their level of understanding and skill. Now, the last game was tally ball. Do I have time to keep going, Ellen?
You can do, yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is the last game. Sorry about that. So the last game was tally ball. I believe some of you would know this game as key ball. Here in Portugal, we can call it bola ao capitão, or ball to the captain. So what we do here is for year 4s, they had to complete 5 passes, and after the 5th pass, they had to attempt to pass the ball to the person in the key. In this case, I didn't have the basketball court key. I did add a hoop, so we had one person inside of the hoop, and they could only change possession as I would tell them, because I wanted them to focus on passing the ball and trying to defend instead of swapping possessions. And then on year 5, they had to complete also 5 passes, and after the 5th pass, they had to attempt to the person in the hoop. And in this case, they had that change of possession because I had one hoop on each side of the court, and this was like a sideways basketball court. And then with year 9, they had to complete not 5 but 10 passes, and after the 10th pass, they would attempt to score a hoop. So here, there's no ball to the captain, and there's no key ball, so there's not a person in the key waiting to shoot. Whoever is there on the 10th pass, or if they want to keep passing the ball until they find the best option, they could do that and then score a basket. So then here there is that change of possession, and the ball could be easily intercepted. So I will move on here to the video with year 4. And what I've done here, once again, I had them. So this took a little bit longer. So this was a 45-minute class that I used every single bit of it because I took longer with the demonstration. So here I had the girls to find a person to be the captain. And then I explained them about the game. I told them that they could do 5 passes, and then if they completed the 5 passes, they would get a point. But if they were able to pass to the captain, that would give them an extra point. So here they're counting. They're moving actually pretty well for their age. They're attempting to move around. So here is the other group. Actually, this group was a little bit more developed in terms of skills, which made the games a little bit more competitive. So here I was already without time. So this game didn't take that long. It took around a minute or two, but it was easy for them to do that transfer from the first and the second game to this one. And here at the end, I actually asked them, so instead of giving them the goal of the class in the beginning with year 4s and 5s, at the end, I asked them what the goal of the class was and what we had been working on throughout the class. So they were pretty engaged in trying to understand and discuss about it. So not all of them were spot on, but they were around the topic, and I didn't tell them it was wrong. It is their opinion and what they're trying to figure out or make sense from the class. The only thing here that I've done was the person that said communicate. I actually gave him a high five just because he was really spot on, and that would let the other ones know that it was that. So everything was right, and I praised all of them. So yeah, that's what I've done. I helped them a little bit at the end through questioning, asking them what we have done today, what we worked on, and they were very close to what the goal of the class was without me telling them, just by asking those questions throughout the games and changing the games and making them reflect about the games and the questions in the middle of the games. So they were pretty close. I was actually very happy with that. And then on year 5s, I did something pretty similar. The only thing I've done differently here in the beginning was I made even teams. So I chose the teams because they were not skill-wise, they were not even, and it wouldn't be as competitive, or motivation-wise, it wouldn't be that good for the ones that are a little bit ahead in terms of skills. I could have done different groups, one that was probably a little bit less skilled and the other one more skilled, but I didn't have enough players that were good enough, so I decided to mix them a little bit and make the teams. And here, as you can see, you have one captain on each end of the court, and they were changing throughout. So here there's a little bit of mistake over there. Some of them were stepping outside of the hoop and they were confused, the captains. So what I've done here was I stopped both groups, and we can do that. It's actually good to do that when we see that the mistakes or the questions that they have are actually the same. So instead of stopping one group at a time, we stop the whole class. We explain again, we make sure that they understand, and then if they have further questions that are different, then we can go to one of the groups. So over here, I let one group keep going. And because the other group still had some issues and questions, I just went to that group and followed them. So once again here, I believe you were able to see that there was a pass that was done backwards over there. And I did see that, and I followed up on that. I asked them if they were able to see their peer to do that pass, and he said that he couldn't see it, but because he couldn't walk, he just decided to pass over. So he knew that he didn't do a proper pass, and he was able to correct that. And it was good to see that he was able also to understand why he did that pass and why he shouldn't. So same thing here at the end of the class, I asked them what was the goal of the class and what we have been working on. And then here was something completely different that I've done with year 5. So I asked them about the goals of the class, what we have been working on throughout the class. And they said communication, passing, finding space. And after that, I asked them, do you think that these aspects are only worked on in basketball? And they said no. And they said other sports that have exactly the same components or aspects that they can transfer, these skills that they have been working on and these aspects of the game that they can transfer to those games as well. So it was very good to see that they were able to think about other games and understand that the goal of the class could be transferred to other games as well. And then with year 9, what I've done was I decided to let them choose their groups. So here it was pretty easy. Of course, I had a group that was a little bit stronger than the other group. So what I decided to do was the 2 students that were not chosen, I put them in the group actually with the stronger players. So this group over here, there were 2 students way weaker than the other ones. And then I let those students choose their teams. So within each game group, they chose their teams, and these were 3 versus 3 games. So I used 3 half basketball courts. So they started by doing those 10 passes. They couldn't dribble. And after those 10 passes, then they could actually shoot to the hoop. So here it is interesting because what I told them was that I wanted them to focus on completing those 10 passes and focusing on what the goal of the class was. So that's why I told them in the beginning what the goal of the class was, because I wanted them to be focused and aware throughout all of the games about that goal and about what we wanted to accomplish. So after the 10 passes, 1 point. If they score, then they would have an extra point, similar to the captain, ball to the captain situation with year 5 and year 4. So I'll just move forward a little bit. So here, because they are very spaced, I went from group to group as they needed. And what I've done here, probably I won't go over the whole video, but you can keep the PowerPoint. Oh, actually, there were a couple of students that didn't play because they were injured. So what I've done was I used their help as referees. So this is a really good way of not only keeping them motivated and part of the class, but also making sure that they understand the goal of the class as well, instead of just staying there and watching. So they were part of it. They were able to do a work that is not a passive work, very active, engaging in the situation. Here with this group, I asked if there was a group that was able by that time to complete 10 passes. And I asked them why they weren't able to complete those passes. So they said that they were not communicating. And then I helped them by saying, yes, if you don't talk, then you don't know where you're at in terms of counting. Still very quiet though. Really good movement. And then here is the group with a little bit better skill set. They were very competitive. I changed the rules with this group quite a bit. And here with this group, there had an extra player. So the girl in yellow, she was a joker. So it means that they were playing a 4 versus 3 basketball game, and she would swap every single time that they changed possession. This was interesting because this group was actually a little bit less skilled, which was good having that 4 versus 3, giving a little bit of an advantage to the So here she changed, she actually passed to the wrong person because she was playing with both teams. So she said not to call her. So here was interesting because then at the end, when I asked them about the goal of the class, they said about nonverbal communication. And this was because they couldn't ask or call her name because she would know. Now here with this group, I started by adding dribbling, so they were able to dribble. And then the referee could call fouls because they were actually being pretty aggressive with each other. As you can see here, the team that chose not to dribble as much and keep doing passing, which is the one that has the ball right now, was a little bit more successful than the one that chose to pass straight away. I think they understood that by passing, they were able to move quicker. And they pretty much kept that strategy. And then here, this group of, they were actually doing a good job moving around, but they were still very quiet. And as you can see on defense, which was not my focus, they were pretty much just going to the ball instead of having a strategy over there. So I'll try to move forward a little bit. So here, just to let you know, with the group that was a little bit more skilled, I actually end up with a 3 versus 3 formal game with one change. So what I've done was the 2 players that were not the strongest players, so they were the weaker from those teams, they were the only ones allowed to score, which made the group a little bit more cohesive, and they were actually helping each other and talking to each other a little bit more because they had to make sure that the ball at the end of not the 10 passes, because then they didn't have to complete the 10 passes. I've changed that as well. So they only had to pass the ball throughout all the players of the team, and then they could score. So over there, they had to find a way to find that weaker link and help them score. So help them be in a good position to score. And then with the other groups, I also add dribbling as well, but I didn't go all the way to a formal 3 versus 3 game. And the team with the joker, I actually took the girl out and have her referee, which was very good because then they were able to do a 3 versus 3 game, still actually without the 10 passes, dribbling, but not quite there a formal game. So there were 2 groups a little bit less advanced, and then there was one group working in a different situation, in a formal game situation within the same group. So here what you can see is at the end, I finished with questioning. So here we're talking about communication. They said communication. And then we were talking about nonverbal or verbal communication. And they were actually able to express here that situation that I previously referred, which is that girl that was actually playing on both sides. So they couldn't actually say the names, and they started by waving or asking for the ball without actually talking. So that was a nonverbal communication that they found as the best strategy for that game. So here, once again, there's one more thing that changed. So the spacing, number of players, questioning, and I added the game rules. So here, if we look at year 9, the game rules were more complex, but different from group to group. So while in year 4 and year 5, I kept pretty much both groups working with the same rules. And as I was changing, it changed for all the groups pretty much at the same time. With this group, because their levels were so different, then I was able to, okay, one group is working on one thing, and then the other ones were following behind, but as they were able to in terms of skill level and understanding. So now, just to finish, I believe I'm taking a little bit longer than I should, but when teaching or coaching, it is important to be flexible. So this is something that we need to keep in mind when we teach different age groups and skill levels, is that you might need to change what you had planned throughout a session or a game. There is no perfect formula. So you will make mistakes, or the games that you choose might not adapt and you need to change them accordingly. And the same games can be used throughout different age groups and skill levels when modified accordingly. So once again, I've done the same games, but I've adapted them to the level of each group and each age group. Observing is key to be able to modify the games as needed. So I took time mostly on the first game and with year 9 throughout that first game of passing to observe the students and make sure that I knew them a little bit in terms of skill and understanding of the game to make those changes as needed. Now we need to focus on elements that are passive to be transferred from game to game, which helps them create that awareness throughout all the games. We need to modify the games to keep the students motivated and engaged. We need to use questioning as well to foster awareness, game understanding, critical thinking, and problem solving as well. And the questioning here, it might be open-ended, it might be closed-ended, or a little more structured in the beginning if they need. And then as soon as you create that environment where they feel comfortable in sharing their ideas and what they think about the questions, then you can move on to a more open-ended situation in terms of questioning. And it is good to have some question starters. So questions that you can actually ask to start that conversation. And then you need to remember that mistakes are normal throughout learning. And this is not only for students, but also for teachers. So it is good actually to make sure that we are not too hard on ourselves and we can keep improving and adapting as we go. So yes, that's it. I'm not sure. I think I took a little bit too long, but I believe that the videos were actually very important too.
Thank you, Bianca. It was slightly over, but don't worry, it was absolutely fantastic. And I think the videos really helped there because you got to see the different age groups of the students, you got to see those different levels. I definitely think one of the big components within the literature and that teachers struggle with is being able to adapt to the different skill levels within their group. So I think having that visual of how you've done it with your own students has been very helpful for the webinar. I just want to see, does anyone have any questions? Naoki, Ivan? Naoki, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry there. So thank you for providing very good information. So I like your presentation. That's very fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Naoki, for having me. Thank you.
Ivan, do you have any questions?
Hi, I'm sorry about that because I have a 2-year-old here who's
okay.
But no, it was fantastic. Sorry, I put my camera on. It was fantastic because I also teach volleyball in TGfU, and I teach it in different levels as well. So because I teach in the University of the Philippines, I teach in the College of Human Kinetics, so I have students who are very athletic, but I also have classes. It's the same volleyball classes, but it's for as a general physical education class for students. So I have different levels of students, and it's difficult in the Philippines because I don't have much to ask people about TGfU. There aren't much practicing it, even despite it's been there since 1980. But I'm the one who's mostly practices it in my university, and I have not many people to ask. So looking at how you conducted your class, even if it was a different sport, different game, it seemed to be, I was able to relate to it a lot. In conducting the classes, in questioning, So sometimes I'd also feel lost if I were asking the correct questions. Sometimes it would be very structured. Sometimes it would be open-ended, and it sometimes would feel that am I asking the correct questions? But when you put it over there, it made more sense. That it also depended on the maturity and the understanding of the students, because sometimes in my university, in my college, because I'm also teaching, I have students who are varsity students in the game, so they come in with very plenty
Advanced
knowledge.
level.
Yeah, very advanced, and that sometimes the gap is so huge, so I have to give a different instruction also to them, in order for them to help also teach the game to the other
Yes.
students as well. So it's a different instruction for them as well, so that they can adapt more. And sometimes I'd have to tell them that to these varsity players or these students, that if they don't help out also the other students understand the game quicker, they're not going to reach or be able to play the game within the class at their
Yes.
level, and or help them out. So the gap would be too wide. So it gives to them a different purpose as well when they're teaching. It's the same also with I've tried also teaching. So because I've always teaching in university, I've also tried teaching somewhere in 10 to 12 years old volleyball. So
Yep.
and then the questioning also changed, and also the it was the same game, it's completely the same game, but the questioning changed, um how you interacted with them, and the modification of the game had to change just a bit. And it was also the same, there was some kind of chaos also happening on
Yeah.
the game, so I could relate it very much to what you were doing. And now I feel a bit more normal teaching something TGfU, and in that case, because it sometimes just doesn't feel perfect all the time, and you kind of doubt yourself when you're teaching it, that if you are doing the same thing, because you have no one to ask for. So
Yes.
thank you very much, Dr.
Thank
Aguiar,
you very much,
for
Ivan.
for that one. That was
Let me just tell you
very,
something. I believe that the being afraid of failure, I think we all are a little bit,
yeah,
especially when we go the first time to teach. There's that fear of doing something wrong, or actually not helping our students as we want to help. But I believe that, and this is something that I took out from Professor Richard Light as well, and all the positive pedagogy and game sense and teaching games for understanding, is that this process of learning is not only for the students, is also for the teachers. And there is an exchange of learning throughout all this process, that the students also have something to teach us. And if we're open to that, all the questioning and all the changes that we do throughout the games would be more meaningful, not only for them as learners, but also for us as teachers as we go. So yeah.
Super. Thank you so much
welcome,
for your
Ella.
presentation today. I think we'll conclude it there, and we'll get in touch about setting up another one for
Yes, we'll do
August
that
time.
for sure. Yes, no problem at all. Thank you, Ivan, for being here. Thank you, Ellen, for actually organizing everything. Thank you, Naoki. Of course, we need to keep in touch to work a little bit more on our research. So thank you all. Actually, I'm not sure if we have many people here, but whoever's here, thank you for being here. And it was a pleasure.
Super. Thank you so much.
thank you,
And we'll see you at our next webinars.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.